10 Lost Tribes from Wikipedia, the Free Encyclopedia, and the Holy Bible. The 12 Tribes. The patriarch Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. The Arabs are the descendants of Ishmael. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau. Esau traded his birthright with Jacob for a pot of red stew. It is believed that the Greeks and the Romans are the descendants of Esau. Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord said, "You shall be called Israel." So Jacob had 12 sons with Bilhah, Zilpah, Leah, and Rachel. Jacob worked 7 years for Laban to marry Rachel, but Laban gave him Leah because she was the oldest, so Jacob had to work another 7 years for Laban to marry Rachel. Bilhah was Rachel's maid, and Zilpah was Leah's maid. The 12 sons of Jacob. The names of the sons of Jacob were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. His sons became known as the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes divided between the house of Israel and the house of Judah, Jews. King Solomon was the last king to reign over a single nation of Israel. After his death in about the 930s BCE, Israel was divided into two separate nations. The southern tribes were called the house of Judah, southern kingdom, the Jews, and the northern 10 tribes called the house of Israel. The tribes of Reuben, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Ephraim, and Manasseh formed the house of Israel. Some members of the tribe of Levi were found in the house of Israel. The tribe of Joseph was divided into two tribes because the tribe of Dan was thrown out. Dan is portrayed as having hated Joseph and having been the one that invented the idea of deceiving Jacob by the smearing of Joseph's coat with the blood of a goat. So instead of Dan, the tribe of Joseph appears twice as the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh. The tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin formed the house of Judah. Members of the tribe of Levi and the remnant of Simeon were also found in the house of Judah. According to 2 Chronicles, members of the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon fled to Judah during the reign of Asa of Judah. Whether these groups were absorbed into the population or remained distinct groups or returned to their tribal lands is not indicated. The Bible tells us that the northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrian Empire in 721 BC. Thus its people were scattered throughout the world. These tribes lost their national identity and became known as the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Many also fled south to Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles mentions northern Israelites who had been spared by the Assyrians, in particular members of Dan, Ephraim, Manasseh, Asher, and Zebulun, and how members of the latter returned to worship at the temple in Jerusalem at that time. Although the Assyrian Empire did not overtake the southern kingdom, Jerusalem was besieged but not taken. The southern kingdom of Judah survived for another 134 years after Israel's fall, but they also rebelled against God and were taken captive by the Babylonian Empire of Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. Some of these people returned to the area of the Holy Land during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. Then in 70 AD, Judah was completely destroyed as a nation by the Roman Empire, and its people were scattered throughout the nations of the world. The 10 Lost Tribes and Biblical Apocrypha. The book of Ezra describes how Ezra returned from the Babylonian exile and led a group of Judean exiles living in Babylon to their home city of Jerusalem and reintroduced the Torah in Jerusalem. The book of the vision of Ezra was written in Aramaic shortly after the destruction of the temple by the Romans. The book of the vision of Ezra is one of a group of texts later designated as the so-called Apocrypha, pseudo-epigraphal books attached to but not included in the biblical canon. 17th to mid-20th century theories. Mormonism. During the time of the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC, a man named Lehi left Jerusalem and went to the Americas with his children. He was a descendant of Joseph. Thus, if you're a Mormon, you're either from the tribe of Ephraim or from the tribe of Manasseh. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which developed in the 19th century in the United States, has extensive teachings regarding the gathering of Israel and the restoration of the 10 tribes. One of their main articles of faith, written by Joseph Smith, Jr., is as follows: "We believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the 10 tribes." Articles of Faith, number 10. In Ezekiel 37, the prophet is told to write on one stick for Judah and on the other for Joseph. The prophet is then told that these two groups shall be someday reunited. "Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for Judah, and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions, and join them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand." Ezekiel 37, verses 16 to 17. Ezekiel 37, 16 to 17 is one of several passages Mormons tried to conscript to prove the Bible spoke of another inspired work of Scripture that was to be brought forth in the latter days. Mormons rely greatly on the Ezekiel passage as a proof text to demonstrate not only the possibility of divine scripture aside from the Bible, but also the Book of Mormon's doctrinal equality with it. They assume that the stick of Judah is the Bible, while the stick of Joseph is the Book of Mormon. The LDS Church believes the Book of Mormon to be a collection of records by prophets of the ancient Americas, written on plates of gold and translated by Joseph Smith, Jr. The LDS Church considers the Book of Mormon one of the main tools for the spiritual gathering of Israel. Groups which claim descent from lost tribes. Judaism in India. Jews started settling in Bombay, India during the 18th century due to its economic opportunities. The Jewish population in India is hard to estimate since its Jewish community is distinct with different origins. While some allegedly arrived during the time of the Kingdom of Judah, others are seen by some as descendants of Israel's 10 lost tribes. There are 5 Jewish groups in India: the Cochin Jews, the Bene Israel, the Baghdadi Jews, the Bene Menashe, and the Bene Ephraim. The Cochin Jews, also called Malabar Jews, are of Mizrahi heritage and the oldest group of Jews in India, with possible roots claimed to date the time of King Solomon. The Cochin Jews settled in the Kingdom of Cochin in South India. After India gained its independence in 1947 and Israel was established as a nation, most Cochin Jews emigrated to Israel in the mid-1950s. Following expulsion from Iberia in 1492 by the Alhambra Decree, a few families of Sephardic Jews made their way to Cochin in the 16th century. They became known as Paradesi Jews, or White Jews. The Bene Israel of India may be descended from the lost tribe of Zebulun. Baghdadi Jews, also known as Iraqi Jews, are Jewish emigrants from Baghdad and elsewhere in Iraq. The main Baghdadi Jewish communities in Asia are found in India, Yangon, Singapore, and Shanghai. The majority of Baghdadi Jews lived in the Indian cities of Mumbai and Calcutta. In the present, less than 4,000 Jews live in Mumbai. Today, the majority of Mumbai's Jews reside in Israel. The Bene Menashe are a group of indigenous people from India's northeastern border states of Manipur and Mizoram. The Bene Menashe claim descent from the lost tribe of Manasseh. Since the late 20th century, they have been studying Hebrew and converting to Judaism. In 2005, Israel's chief Sephardic rabbi recognized them as descendants of one of the lost tribes, paving the way for them to immigrate to Israel under the right of return law. The community of Bene Ephraim was established in the late 1980s in Andhra Pradesh by a group of Christianized Madiga who declared that they belonged to one of the lost tribes of Israel. They claim descent from the tribe of Ephraim and say that they traveled from Israel through Western Asia, Persia, Afghanistan, Tibet, and into China for 1600 years before arriving in southern India more than 1,000 years ago. Africa. The Beta Israel are Ethiopian Jews. Some members of the Beta Israel, as well as several Jewish scholars, believe that they are descended from a lost tribe of Dan. Early DNA studies showed they were descended from Ethiopians, but in the 21st century, new studies have shown possible connection to a few Jews of the 4th to 5th century, possibly living in Sudan. Most of them made aliyah from Ethiopia to Israel, assisted by the Israeli government. Operation Moses 1984 and Operation Solomon 1991. Igbo Jews are members of the Igbo people of Nigeria who practice Judaism. Most claim descent from ancient Israelite migrants into Nigeria. The Igbo Jews claim descent variously from the tribes of Ephraim, Naphtali, Levi, Gad, Manasseh, and Zebulun. The theory, however, does not hold up to historical scrutiny. The Lemba or Waremba from South Africa claim to be descendants of several Jewish men who traveled from what is now Yemen to Africa in search of gold, where they took wives and established new communities. DNA testing has genetically linked the Lemba with modern Jews and Muslim Semites. According to the oral history of the Lemba, their ancestors were Jews who came from a place called Sina several hundred years ago and settled in East Africa. Sena is an abandoned town in Yemen. They have specific religious practices similar to those in Judaism, such as kosher-like dietary restrictions and slaughter practices, male circumcision rites, strict rules against intermarriage, and Semitic-sounding clan names. Central Asia. The Pashtuns are predominantly Muslim people, native to Afghanistan, who adhere to a pre-Islamic indigenous religious code of honor and culture, Pashtunwali. The myth about Pashtuns being from the lost tribes of Israel has never been sustained through concrete historical evidence. Genetic studies also refute the myth. However, the tribal name Yusufzai in Pashto has been claimed to translate as the sons of Joseph. As described in Mahsan-i-Afghani, a historical work from the 17th century by Nehamtullah, an official in the royal court of Mughal Emperor Jehangir, a similar story is told by Iranian historian Farishta. Jewish Bukhara. Jews' arrival in Central Asia. The beginning of a Jewish settlement in the area around Bukhara may go as far as the 7th century BCE, when the Jews were exiled by the Assyrians. It is to this day that the Bukharan Jews themselves trace their heritage. Many historians contend, however, that it was probably a century or two later, during the reign of Cyrus the Great of Persia, that the Jews began to arrive in Central Asia. Regardless of the exact date the Jews were introduced to Central Asia, all agree that by the end of the 4th century BCE, when Alexander the Great arrived, there was a large community of Jews living in the region. This number was most likely added to following the diaspora, as records show communities of Jews traveled and joined or created settlements as far east as China. Many of the Jews lived in either the city of Bukhara or Samarkand. In fact, it was not until an earthquake in 1720 that left Samarkand uninhabitable that all of the Jews living in the region moved to Bukhara. Persian Jews or Iranian Jews have had a continuous presence in Iran since the time of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity. The history of immigrant Jews to Iran goes back to more than 3,000 years ago. The Mizrahi Jews are Jews of Middle Eastern, North African, and Asian descent. They are also sometimes referred to as Eastern, Oriental, or Arab Jews, and they represent the oldest Jewish communities in the world. Most of the Mizrahi population today lives in Israel, with small communities in major cities around the world, and reduced numbers of Mizrahim scattered across Africa and the Middle